Hello. This is my new digital. It's a botanical trifold, and this is the base. There are 3 panels. I've folded mine already, and there are a couple of ways you could use this. So you could fold it in a way that makes a zigzag trifold, or you could fold the inside flap in, so it's more like a folio. So that's the 2 options. That panel on the right there is going to be my front cover. Now I've got 2 pockets in the kit. I have left all of the flaps on, so you can decide if you want to fold this over one of those panels, whether you want it on the left or the right, and then obviously the other side will be used to close your pocket. So I'm going to fold mine down the centre and then decide which way I want it to open. And I want it to open like a book, the same way as that front flap on my trifold. So I'm going to cut off that unnecessary tab there. And now I'm just going to score all of my lines. I'm using a scoreboard. You don't have to. You could use a ruler. I just find it a lot easier to use a scoreboard, and I use that last one so I can line it up at the top and the bottom. Just score that last flap, fold that in, burnish it down. So that pocket is now done. I'm going to attach it to that panel on the left hand side, so like I said, it'll open like a book. Now the pockets in the kit have got that kind of scalloped top, and because I didn't know whether you would use this on the left or the right, I've put a little template in the kit so you don't need to use the pockets. So you can just cut that template out, decide which side you want your scallop top, that will then match. Obviously you could just use a little notch if you wanted to, but I've cut that out. There are 2 backing sheets in the kit, but I didn't use them on any of the elements. So I'm going to ink all the way around the edge, and I'm also going to ink just that little inside piece where you can see through that little scallop notch we've made. And now I'm going to just make sure that all folds up nicely, which it does. In the kit there is a little book plate. It's just a paper one, obviously. It's a faux book plate, and I'm going to pop a label over the top there because I didn't think that one was big enough for the front cover of my trifold. So I'll glue that into place. Now I'm just going to find a couple of brads or split pins, as we call them. I'm going to put a couple of little holes in that book plate. There are a couple of faux split pins on there already, but I'm going to put a couple of real ones in. Now I'm going to actually glue that down, just decide where I want to place that on my cover. So glue that onto the front, and then I'm going to put the holes through that pocket as well, make them a little bit bigger so there's room to put my split pins in. Turn that over, flatten them out. I'm going to put some glue on because I don't want anything to catch on those, and just add a little bit of tape just to make sure they're secure, and burnish that down. Now I'm going to glue around the edge of my tabs so I can close my pocket. So we'll close that up, burnish it down, make sure that's nice and stuck. And then I'm just going to decide which one of those panels I want on the front. And I think I go for the middle one because it's the plainest, and we're obviously going to cover that one up. The other 2 are going to be shown. So I'm just going to glue the flap on that pocket, lay it down, line up that panel, close the flap, and then I'm going to give that a good burnish down, just to make sure that's nicely stuck. I'm also going to ink that little tab just to make sure when it is open you don't see the white. And that's going to go on that front panel there, and it will open up. You could decorate further on the inside if you want to, and then those 2 panels can go there. So there are also 2 long, you can use these as pockets on the edge. I haven't rounded the edges, so you can decide whether you put them on the left or the right, or use them down the centre as a belly band. There's lots of options, and there are 2 to choose from. So I'm going to start decorating the inside, and I'm going to use one of those pieces on the left hand side. So I'm going to round the corners on the right hand side. That will need an ink all the way round the edge, and then I'll just make sure that's going to fit nicely, which I know it will, and I'm going to glue that into place. Once that's glued down, I'm just going to add a little label to the bottom there. There are lots of labels in the kit, so I'm going to add one, give that a little bit more interest. And now I'm going to start working on the pockets for the inside. So I've got this long pocket first of all. I'm going to use my scoreboard just to fold that nicely and burnish that down. Obviously we need to ink all the way around the edge. And then I'm going to line that up and stick that into my centre panel. The two smaller ones I'm going to prepare for that right hand side, and they are done and inked. And in those smaller pockets I've decided to use the kind of, it's almost like a little Polaroid snapshot, and once I'd done that I printed it again and backed them so they were double-sided. I wasn't initially going to do that, but I did. So now I'm going to glue the tabs of my centre pocket and put that into place. I want it fairly close to the bottom but not right at the bottom. So I'm just making sure that's lined up and it's not over the creases, so it's going to move nicely. And then with the smaller pockets, I'm going to glue one of the pockets and line it up along the bottom with that centre pocket and burnish that down. I'm just going to pop one of those tags in because I've decided to use those in my pockets, but I want to make sure I give it enough room before I glue the second pocket down. So glue the tabs, just popping that in. I didn't really need to, I just wanted to make sure it didn't hang over the top. Burnish that down, and now my two pockets are in place on the right hand side. So there are a few tags in the kit. They're double-sided, so just glued that shut and pop that. That's going to go in that pocket. So now I move on to the envelopes. I've cut both of the envelopes up. I think I only use one in the end, but there are options in the kit. Once I've cut the envelopes, I use my corner rounder, two different sizes, to round the edges of those envelopes. And then off with the scoreboard, score those creases, and the envelopes are ready to go. Now again, I didn't back them, I forgot to back them, so I'm just going to ink the inside of that envelope where it's going to show. And now I'm just going to add a little bit of glue to the edge of each of those flaps and close up my envelope. And I'm going to do exactly the same with the second envelope. If you don't glue all the way up, you'll be able to tuck your top flap into that bottom piece of your envelope. I made my little poppy tag off camera, and you can see I've put a little slit in there and tucked a label underneath. It was a little bit tricky to make that, so I did it before I started to film. These two elements here, one's for the top, one's for the bottom, they'll fit on that panel. The small one can be used to make a scrap paper pad, and then these two larger ones can go over the top, and you can put some kind of document style closure on there if you wanted to. I don't use them in my folio, but it's just to show you there are other options. You don't necessarily have to use the pockets, you don't have to use these panels on the outside, you can always put them on the inside, but you've got that option to add some policy style flaps if you needed to. I'm gluing my two panels into place, and now I'm going to glue that final one down as well, that front cover. So I'm going to put my little clipboard style tag in the front pocket because I think that's quite cute. On the inside I'm going to put one of the double-sided tags and those little images there. In that side pocket I'm going to put an envelope and a journaling tag. There are several to choose from in the kit. I do think about putting a belly band in, but decide against that. I use a piece of sari silk as my closure, something very simple. You could make this much more elaborate if you wanted to. So we've got the tag in the front there. I'm going to do a slow down version of this in a moment. So thanks for watching. This digital kit is going to be in my Etsy and in our shop. The links will be down in the description box. And I hope you like this make. It's nice and simple. It was a really fun kit to put together. There are 2 envelopes. I think there's 2 of those journaling tags in the kit. There's 2 double-sided tags, the Polaroids, lots of labels and different options to put this together. I hope you will give it a go. Thanks for joining me. Bye.